This is a fan-made parody of the Poirot novels, and the rights to these stories are held by the Agatha Christie estate. The rights to the Poirot TV show are owned by ITV. I encourage all fans to support the official release and view the show through legal means. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime Fiction. For those of you new to the channel, what we do here is we take crime fiction TV shows and movies and turn them into a true crime narrative. This way you get to enjoy the tension of a true crime show without all the gory details. Remember to like and subscribe for more intriguing adventures. This is True Crime Fiction, Season 1, Episode 3, The Adventure of Johnny Waverly. Now enjoy the show. A young boy, happily playing in the driveway, is suddenly interrupted by the hurried cries of his maid, who rushes him inside with great urgency. This was young Johnny Waverly, the child of a wealthy family. His parents, Marcus and Ada Waverly, had received a ransom note that threatened to kidnap their son at midday the following day, if they did not give £50,000. Making matters even more alarming, this was not the first extortion letter this family had received. The first one had demanded £10,000 and the second one had demanded £20,000. Ada hastily made her way to her son's room, her heart heavy with worry. She embraced him tightly, seeking reassurance that everything would be all right. But despite her efforts to remain strong, she could not shake the gnawing feeling deep inside her. Time was running out as the deadline quickly approached. With no other options left, the Waverleys turned to the one person they believed could help them, the famous Belgian detective, Hercule Poirot. Hercule Poirot sat in his office, diligently attending to his routine tasks. It was a slow day, nothing out of the ordinary. The mundane nature of the work was so tedious that Poirot found himself frequently glancing up from his desk to observe Miss Lemon's unusual activity. He watched in intrigue as she battled her way to the top of a towering filing cabinet, and couldn't help but wonder what had prompted her to undertake such a peculiar task. Poirot gently reminded his ever-efficient secretary that it would soon be lunchtime, but to his dismay, Miss Lemon informed him that their meal would not be ready. No matter. Poirot observed that his diligent secretary had been meticulously sorting through piles of paperwork from all of his past cases, carefully organizing each one. "My dear Miss Lemon," Poirot began, impressed by her dedication to the task, "you never cease to amaze me." Even the punctual detective was taken aback by the immense amount of work that had been completed. In the midst of admiring Miss Lemon's meticulous efforts, Poirot's attention was caught by the unexpected arrival of Marcus Waverly. Poirot greeted him, surprised by the unannounced visit. Marcus cut straight to the point, wasting no time in briefing Poirot on the dire situation regarding his son. He handed over the ransom letters, making sure that the detective had a complete understanding of the severity of the situation. "Please, Monsieur Poirot," he implored, his voice laced with desperation. Marcus attempted to dismiss the threat as a mere jest, but Poirot quickly dashed his hopes of reassurance. "I must caution you against being overly optimistic. Do not believe these threats to be empty. You must stay vigilant, my friend. Your son's well-being depends on it. Let us not underestimate their determination, monsieur," Poirot warned. "There is no reason to believe that they will not act upon their threats. We must take every precaution to ensure your son's safety, and be prepared for the worst." Just then, the ever-gallant Captain Hastings entered the room, eager to provide his assistance. "Poirot, my good man," Hastings boomed, offering his services. Captain Hastings, after perusing the letters, suggested the possibility of a gang of foreign criminals being responsible, but Poirot swiftly dismissed that notion. "That line of thinking will lead us astray. Let us set aside such speculation and focus on the matter at hand." Poirot's tone was confident as he explained, "We must not be misled by baseless assumptions. There is no indication that the author of these letters is a foreigner. We must look closer to home." Poirot turned his attention back to Marcus, pressing for more information. "Monsieur Waverly, can you think of anyone who might hold a grudge against you?" he inquired. "Or perhaps someone who has been slighted by you in the past?" Marcus struggled to conjure up any names of people who may bear a grudge against him and his family. "I can't think of anyone offhand, Monsieur Poirot. We've lived a quiet life here in the countryside, surrounded by friends and neighbors. I can't imagine who might have any reason to cause us harm." He had no suspicions about anyone in his household. "I trust all of those who work on my estate implicitly," he asserted. Poirot stood up from his chair, the look in his eyes betraying his determination to solve this case. "My dear Captain, Monsieur," he addressed both Hastings and Marcus, "we must make haste to the police station. Every moment counts in this delicate matter. It is time to put all our efforts into solving this mystery and rescuing the young Master Waverly from the grasp of these malicious ransomers. Mr. Waverly's demeanor shifted suddenly. "Wait a moment, Monsieur Poirot," he interjected, his eyes narrowing. "I must confess, I'm not entirely comfortable with involving the police in this matter." Mr. Waverly sighed, his frustration apparent as he recounted his previous encounter with the police. "I tried going to the police when I received the first 2 demands for ransom," he explained, "but they dismissed it as a trivial matter." Mr. Waverly frowned at the idea of revisiting the police station, but Poirot's persuasive nature got the best of him. "I understand your reservations, Monsieur," Poirot said, his tone calm and assured. "But please consider this. A brief conversation with the police will take but a few minutes of your time. It's worth it to ensure the safety of your son, is it not?" Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Mr. Waverly set off on their journey to the police station. The train ride was a quiet but tense one, with each passenger lost in their own thoughts. Poirot, however, was busy analyzing every aspect of the ransom letters, trying to find the smallest of details that could lead them to the mastermind behind the extortion attempts. "Ah, Captain Hastings," Poirot said, "I trust you would prefer to take the speed of your motor car to the reliable regularity of a train journey." Hastings, with a glint in his eye, nodded. "Oh, you know me too well, Poirot. The open road beckons, but I concede. The train is more reliable for this time-sensitive venture." Upon reaching the station, Poirot and Hastings were led to Chief Inspector Japp's office, where they were offered a cup of tea. The atmosphere, however, was far from convivial. As they sipped their tea, the conversation turned to the ransom situation. "So, Chief Inspector Japp," Poirot began, setting down his cup, "I trust you are familiar with the extortion letters that young Master Waverly has been receiving." Upon reaching the station, Poirot and Hastings were led to Chief Inspector Japp's office, where they were offered a cup of tea. The atmosphere, however, was far from convivial.
"We see 100 of these every day, Mr. Waverly. If we was to go chasing about after every one..."
100, Chief Inspector?
Well, perhaps not 100. Mustn't be too literal, Mr. Poirot.
Every day?
Every week, anyway. This is some disaffected employee, some envious neighbour.
We're wasting our time, Mr. Poirot.
No call to take umbrage, Mr. Waverly.
I'm a simple country squire. I pay my taxes, and I'm used to something in return. Now I know better.
There are a lot of taxpayers, Mr. Waverly. There are even quite a lot of country squires. If we was to...
You're not only uncooperative, sir. You're damned offensive.
As you so rightly point out, you were paying me to exercise my judgment and discretion as to what is a serious threat to public order and what is not, and this is not.
Your superior shall hear of this.
I hope he enjoys it as much as I have.
As they traveled back home on the train, the tension was palpable. Poirot tried to diffuse the situation. "Monsieur Waverly, I understand your frustration with the police's reluctance to help," he began. "But we must keep a clear head and continue to gather information. I'm confident we can solve this case." As their train pulled up to the Waverly estate, Poirot couldn't help but be impressed by the grandeur of the property. "Ah, my dear Captain Hastings," he said, marveling at the sight. Poirot's eyes roamed over the luxurious estate, taking in the opulent surroundings. "It's understandable why the extortionists would demand such a substantial sum," he remarked. The weight of such a burdensome ransom was not lost on Poirot. "Indeed, Captain Hastings," Poirot said, £50,000 is a tremendous sum. Even in today's terms, it would amount to over £3 million. One can only imagine the immense pressure that Mr. Waverly is under, trying to gather such a vast sum in such a short amount of time." As they walked through the grounds, Poirot noticed the extent of the construction work taking place. "It seems that the Waverly estate is undergoing quite the overhaul," he observed, taking in the workers scampering about like a swarm of busy bees. "It's as if the house is more of a construction site than a stately home." Poirot noted the diminished size of the estate as they walked through the grounds. "It appears that the Waverly's property has shrunk quite significantly over the years. I wonder what circumstances could have led to this diminishing of their once grand estate." Poirot's eyes fell upon Mrs. Ada Waverly, and it was clear that she shared her husband's concern for their son's well-being. "Madame Waverly," Poirot began tenderly, "I can see the worry etched on your face. Your concern for your son is understandable. We are doing everything in our power to ensure his safe return." As Hastings casually mentioned his plans for a boat race, Poirot couldn't help but feel a twinge of annoyance. "Captain Hastings, might I remind you that we are currently embroiled in a serious matter here," he said, a slight hint of irritation in his voice. "Perhaps now is not the best time to discuss your leisure activities." Hastings shook his head, confident in his findings. "I've investigated this whole estate, and as far as I can tell, there's nothing amiss," he said, sounding quite sure of himself. "I've spoken to the staff, and none of them seem like the type to be involved in this kind of situation. I think it's just a hoax." Poirot, however, was not convinced by Hastings' assessment. "Captain, I would like to see the house for myself," he said, his gaze steady. "There may be clues to be found that you have overlooked." As their tour continued, Poirot was struck by the sheer size of the Waverly estate. "This is quite an expansive piece of property," he remarked, his eyes darting around the sprawling landscape. Mrs. Waverly, grateful for Poirot's attention to detail, smiled warmly at him. "Thank you, monsieur, for taking the time to go through the estate so thoroughly," she said, her voice tinged with gratitude. "We know you are doing everything you can to find our son." Poirot couldn't help but raise a curious eyebrow as they walked the grounds surrounding the house, observing the extravagant mansion. "You know," he mused aloud to Hastings beside him, "it's odd that the people behind the ransom letters would warn the Waverly family of the impending abduction. It doesn't make much sense. If they were truly serious about kidnapping the boy, they wouldn't give away their plans in advance. There must be more to this than meets the eye. We must keep digging to uncover the truth." As they sat down for dinner, Poirot noticed the simple fare. "The portions are rather meager," he remarked. "Not exactly the lavish spread I was expecting from such a wealthy family." "Perhaps they're cutting back on expenses," Hastings suggested. "With all that work being done on the estate, they may not have much money to spare." Poirot chuckled. "Well, a free meal is a free meal, my dear Hastings." The tension was palpable at the table. Mrs. Waverly barely touched her food, her face etched with worry. She was on the brink of tears, the fear for her son's safety weighing heavily on her heart. The mood was somber, the pleasantries and small talk replaced by an eerie silence. Mrs. Waverly was momentarily distracted from her worry as her son entered the room, bidding her good night before retiring for the night. "Good night, darling," she whispered, her voice filled with love. That night, as the sun began to set, Poirot and Hastings decided to stay at the Waverlys to keep a close eye on the situation. After a brief tour of the guest room, Poirot settled in for the night, his mind working overtime, going over every single scenario in his head as he tried to make sense of this enigmatic case. The night was disturbed by something that woke our dear Hercule from his slumber. A quiet sound coming from somewhere inside the house. Being the curious soul that he was, he could not simply ignore such a distraction. He quietly slipped out of bed, clad only in his night clothes, and decided to investigate. As Poirot poked his head out the door, he spotted a housemaid walking up the stairs. As he started to close the door, he noticed a strange noise coming from the floor above. As the footsteps grew louder, Poirot realized he had nowhere to hide. The room was sparsely furnished, and he was in nothing but his nightclothes. He quickly decided to abandon his attempts at stealth. As the mystery person turned to face Poirot, he could see that it was just a male servant, busying himself with some nocturnal housekeeping. Relieved, Poirot realized there was no sinister plot or suspicious activity going on, as more and more people came out of seemingly nowhere. Rushing to the bedroom of Mr. and Mrs. Waverly, Poirot started to grow even more bewildered. He noticed that they seemed to be in a rush, each more anxious than the last. Something was clearly happening, and he felt a sense of urgency, a feeling of impending doom in the air. Poirot quickly joined the small crowd of people surrounding Mrs. Waverly's room. Inside, he could see that she was in a bad state, shivering with chills and flushed with fever. "What on earth is going on here?" he asked, as several servants fussed and flailed around. With the commotion ensuing, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. "This is not normal," he muttered, his eyes darting around the room, scanning for any signs of a nefarious scheme at work. It may seem like a rushed conclusion, but Poirot's honed instincts were never wrong. His many years of experience in the field gave him an uncanny ability to read between the lines, and this situation was no different. Every detail, every action was screaming of something amiss. As Poirot made his way to the breakfast table, he found Hastings already sitting there, helping himself to the breakfast laid out for him. As Poirot sat down, he noticed the simple breakfast laid out before him. The kedgeree appeared bland and lifeless, his displeasure evident. "Perhaps the Waverlys have fallen on hard times," Hastings mused. Last night's dinner consisted of little more than a single potato, a small cutlet of meat, and a few vegetables. Their discussion was interrupted by the entrance of Mr. Waverly, who looked tired and disheveled. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice weary. "Good morning. I hope you both slept well." Mr. Waverly had a grim look on his face. "My wife is still indisposed," he said, his voice heavy with worry. "But that is not the only concern we have. Another letter has arrived." Mr. Waverly looked deeply troubled as he disclosed the new demand. "The ransom has increased," he said, his voice quavering. "They're now demanding £75,000. It's an outrageous sum." Mr. Waverly's tone grew even more panicked as he shared another distressing detail. "The letter was discovered on my pillow, which is alarming considering I was only in the shower for about 10 minutes. The intruder must have been and gone within that time frame. Mr. Waverly's frustration grew and he made a drastic decision.
What are you going to do?
Sack 'em. Sack the lot of them. Unless one of them owns up, of course. Treadwell will stay, of course. He's been here since I was a boy. And Miss Collins.
I'm sorry, Miss Collins?
My wife's secretary. Nothing wrong with her. My God. I can't abide a traitor.
The staff are assembled, Mr. Waverly.
Thank you, Treadwell.
Monsieur Waverly, I ask you to reconsider. The emptier a house is, the easier it will be for a miscreant to move about unseen.
Nonsense. Mr. Poirot, you stick to your job, and I shall stick to mine. Then we shan't fall out.
But to empty a house a few hours before the threatened abduction seems to me to be the height of folly.
How dare you, sir? You call me a fool? I'm doing what I consider best for the defense of my son. Allow me to be the judge of that.
The arrival of Chief Inspector Jack and the dozen or so police officers caught Poirot off guard. The Chief Inspector greeted him with a nod. "I wouldn't want some lesser detective to be tangled up in this case," he said. The Chief Inspector was being less than honest, and they both knew it. But the truth was, the Chief Inspector knew he needed Poirot's expertise. It seemed that a conversation between Mr. Waverly and the Chief Inspector's superior had occurred, leading to the police finally taking action. As if the situation weren't already bad enough, Mr. Waverly had taken it upon himself to dismiss the entire household staff. Needless to say, the staff wasn't very pleased with the news of their termination. Mrs. Withers, a loyal servant who had worked diligently in the house for years, was especially outraged. "I have been with this household for years, faithfully serving the Waverleys," she protested vehemently. Mrs. Withers felt deeply disrespected and humiliated. Without hesitation, she gathered her belongings and made her way for the door. While Mrs. Withers' departure was fiery and noisy, the majority of the staff chose not to make a scene. While chaos reigned outside, Poirot and Hastings seized the opportunity to tour the house and speak to the remaining staff members. They discovered some intriguing information amidst the construction work, adding to the complex web of the case. Intriguingly, one of the construction workers mentioned that Mrs. Ada Waverly didn't seem to care much for the house. "She seems uninterested in the renovation," he remarked. "I'm surprised they're going through all this trouble for a woman who doesn't seem to care." The worker's blunt assessment struck Poirot. "She could witness this entire place crumble before her eyes and not bat an eyelid," he said. The worker's blunt assessment struck Poirot. It's an intriguing attitude for someone who lives in such luxury. While the conversation with the construction worker didn't provide immediate answers, it offered a fresh perspective. Poirot and Hastings left the estate and made their way to a nearby pub for a leisurely lunch. Poirot happily indulged in a full English breakfast, savoring every bite. Hastings, determined as always, insisted on having a couple of beers alongside their meal. Their enjoyable lunch came to an abrupt end. Poirot and Hastings downed the last of their drinks and made haste back to the estate. They had hoped to make it back in time for the deadline, but their hopes were quickly dashed as their car broke down on the side of the road. This unexpected issue only fueled Poirot's suspicions of foul play, as he couldn't shake the feeling that these inconveniences were not mere coincidences.
Do you know what I think? I think someone's tampered with this. Someone's tampered with this to keep us out of the way.
How would they have known we were going to use the car?
Ah. Well, it's not the carburetor, anyway.
This is not what I long to hear, Hastings.
Eh?
I want to hear what it was, not what it was not. Better still,
Back at the Waverly estate, Chief Inspector Jack was busy fortifying the property's security. Meanwhile, Mr. Waverly had relieved Miss Collins of her childcare duties and had taken the responsibility to care for Johnny himself, allowing her to tend to his sick wife instead. As Poirot paced back and forth, frustrated at the delays, Hastings attempted in vain to repair the car. Despite his best efforts, the vehicle remained stubbornly immobile. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as they waited for the deadline to pass. The clock ticked away relentlessly, the sound of it echoing in the air like a ticking bomb. Everyone seemed on edge, their nerves fraying with each passing moment. The tension in the air was immediately shattered as the clock struck 12. The police officers shouted out that they had caught the culprit, some common criminal with a bottle of chloroform and a letter, and everyone rushed to the scene, eager to resolve the situation. In their frenzy, the little Johnny was left alone, feeling abandoned and forgotten. As the culprit was revealed, it was clear that the situation was far more complex than they had initially thought. Something deeper was at play here, something darker and more sinister. The ransom note in hand, Poirot's eyes widened as he read the sum. This time, the demand was a staggering £100,000. Calculating for inflation, it would amount to over £6 million in today's money, a sum so exorbitant it seemed almost comical. Though the suspect was apprehended, it was clear that he was not the mastermind behind this sinister plot. Nonetheless, he was taken into custody, adding another layer to this perplexing case. The sound of the car horn shattered the tense atmosphere, and they all turned to see Johnny sitting in the back of the car, tears streaming down his face as he cried out for help. This turn of events stunned everyone present, sending a shockwave of concern throughout the group. The sound of the clock striking 12 echoed through the air, and the police officers hurried back into the house. However, they were all perplexed to find that the grandfather clock in the living room had been turned forward by 10 minutes. This unexpected discovery only deepened the mystery. As it seemed, the perpetrator was always one step ahead. Poirot rushed to find the chief inspector, and Hastings caught up to him, panting with exertion. "I've got news. Someone sabotaged the car," Hastings gasped, his voice filled with excitement. They drained most of the fuel and fiddled with the gauge to make it look full. Poirot quickly found the chief inspector, and together they made their way to interview the man who had been caught carrying the chloroform and letter, Mr. Rogers. The man was brought in for questioning, and the trio entered the room. The interrogation revealed very little, as they could not even determine if Rogers was the man's first or last name. The entire situation felt like a setup, and it was clear that the true mastermind behind the case was still out there, lurking in the shadows. They found him to be less than cooperative. He responded with only grunts and mumbles, likely due to the fact that the police officers were questioning him in a hostile manner. Poirot took charge and adopted a warm, affable tone, treating the man as he would a client in his office. This change in approach seemed to work miracles, as the man slowly began to open up. The man recounted that he had been given the package and the money by a geezer, and that this elderly man had instructed him to deliver the package to the main house side door at exactly 10 minutes to 12. The man recalled that the conversation had taken place around 10:15, but he had a hard time recalling the exact appearance of the man. However, he was able to provide some crucial details. "Quite peculiar. Short, with a thick grey mustache and dressed in a grey uniform," the man explained, his voice tinged with unease. "He had an odd look about him, and his voice was strange, with a peculiar accent I can't quite place." The man's description of the mysterious geezer included a mention of a toffee-nosed man running around in a monkey suit. He went on to say that if such a person were to have a son, the son would look and sound exactly like the man he was describing. As Poirot listened, his sharp detective skills led him to recognize a striking resemblance between the description and Mr. Treadwell. Yet, Mr. Treadwell had been with Mr. and Mrs. Waverly during the kidnapping itself, and he had no sons. This only deepened the mystery, leaving more questions than answers. With the information gathered, Chief Inspector Jack arrested the suspect, Mr. Rogers, on charges of vagrancy. Meanwhile, Poirot decided to pay a visit to Mr. Treadwell, eager to uncover any possible clues. Mr. Treadwell proved to be a very posh and polite individual, having served with the Waverly family for over 30 years. However, it was clear that he did not hold Mrs. Waverly in the same high regard as he did her husband and his predecessors, and it could be seen in his slight distaste for her, evident even while he sang her praises. Mr. Treadwell described Mrs. Waverly as a fine woman, but he also admitted that he didn't agree with the changes she had made around the house since her marriage. While Mr. Treadwell did state that Mrs. Waverly had grown fond of the family over the years, and that their marriage seemed happy, he couldn't conceal his deep disdain for her. It was evident that Mr. Treadwell believed that Mrs. Waverly's significant wealth influenced her behavior. He thought that she wasn't inclined to adhere to the traditional Waverly way, because she had independent financial security. In a stark contrast to Mr. Treadwell's opinions, Hastings found that Miss Collins only had words of praise and admiration for Mrs. Waverly. Her loyalty was clear, and she seemed to adore her employer. She seemed like a person who found it difficult to harbor negative feelings towards anyone. Despite this, Poirot remained resolute in his certainty that he understood the entire situation. However, he confessed that there was still one small detail that eluded his understanding. Poirot was puzzled by this mysterious conundrum. How did the kidnapper escape when the estate was surrounded by policemen? Suddenly, Mr. Waverly revealed the answer, explaining that the house was quite old and had secret priest tunnels built into it. This revelation offered a plausible explanation for how the kidnapper could have escaped with Johnny unnoticed. The theory made sense, but it also suggested a sinister possibility. The culprit must be someone in the inner circle, someone close to the family. This thought left a cold shiver down Poirot's spine. Time was of the essence, and the need to save little Johnny became paramount. Without hesitation, Poirot and Hastings hurriedly entered the ancient priest tunnel, determined to locate the missing child.
You don't expect me to think in the dark, do you?
Ah, Hastings, the little grey cells, sometimes they work even better in the dark. But always we come back to the same question. Why would anyone warn the Waverlys before they kidnap the child?
I suppose they hope to get the money without actually being forced to do it.
But this does not alter the fact that they were making a thing difficult that was perfectly easy. If they do not specify a time or date, nothing would be easier. For them to wait their chance, carry off the child in a motor one day when he is out with his nurse.
I suppose so. I can see a light up ahead.
Good. I'm bored with this tunnel.
They emerged into a garden that was badly in need of care, providing the perfect hiding spot for a kidnapping. To Poirot's observant eyes, he spotted a set of fresh tire tracks leading out to the main road, which confirmed that a driver had been this way and could easily escape without being noticed. With these observations, Poirot began to formulate a theory. He shared his conclusions, explaining that the poisoning of Mrs. Waverly couldn't be a coincidence. The note must have been placed by someone inside the house, and the clock hands had been tampered with for the purpose of the kidnapping. These facts had to be connected, and Poirot sensed a grand scheme at play. Poirot carefully explained the clever scheme to Mr. Waverly, revealing that the perpetrator could only be someone within the house. Knowing that Mrs. Waverly was indisposed and that Miss Collins was attending to her, Poirot deduced that only two people were likely culprits: Mr. Waverly or Mr. Treadwell. As he and Hastings informed Mr. Waverly that they were preparing to depart for London, a look of concern flashed across his face. Mr. Waverly was furious and indignant, shouting and demanding why Poirot was abandoning the search. Poirot remained calm and explained that he knew where little Johnny was being kept, and then handed Mr. Waverly a slip of paper with the address of the cottage. Poirot couldn't help but feel amused as they realized the purse was empty. However, I have a strong suspicion that Mr. Waverly is the mastermind behind the kidnapping of his own son. With his back against the wall, Mr. Waverly admitted his part in the kidnapping scheme, and even drove Poirot and Hastings to the hidden cottage where his son had been kept all along. Mr. Waverly continued to insist that the child was not harmed in any way. He assured Poirot that Johnny was well taken care of throughout the entire ordeal while they made the journey to the secret cottage. Despite being utterly perplexed by this behavior, Poirot kept his composure, determined to get to the bottom of this case. As they arrived at the house, they found little Johnny completely unharmed. The young lad was safely reunited with his father, and the case was closed. In a surprising twist, Mrs. Withers was revealed to be the one tending to Johnny at the cottage. She turned out to be Mr. Treadwell's niece and was also involved in the entire scheme. It seemed that the geezer that Rogers had seen was indeed Mrs. Withers, disguised to fool the police. This revelation caught Poirot off guard, as he had not expected to find her responsible for the kidnapping. The moment he saw her, Poirot realized why she remained undetected throughout the whole investigation. Mrs. Withers had cleverly disguised herself by wearing a false mustache and pulling her hair back to hide her true identity. Poirot took a moment to have a final word with Mr. Waverly, expressing his disgust at his cowardly actions.
If I did not believe you to be a good father at heart, I would not be so willing to give you another chance.
I'll do anything to avoid a scandal.
Precisely. Appearances are what matter, eh? That was why it was intolerable that your wife should call a halt to the restoration work on the house. Having a rich wife is not the same as being rich oneself, monsieur.
Don't worry. I've learned my lesson.
Good. Your name is an old and honored one. Do not jeopardize it again.